The morning of December 19th, 1944, began with a strange silence over the small Belgian village of Krinkelt. Snow covered the narrow roads, the stone farmhouses, and the frozen fields around the village. The cold wind moved slowly through the pine trees on the hills, carrying the faint smell of smoke from distant artillery. To someone passing through, the place might have looked peaceful. But hidden behind the white fields and quiet barns, American soldiers waited in complete silence. Engines were turned off, guns were aimed down empty roads, and somewhere beyond the forest line, the rumble of German Panther tanks was already moving closer.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
Inside the village, the men of the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division knew something big was coming. They had been pushed back for days as the German army launched a sudden offensive through the Ardennes forest. It was December 1944, and Adolf Hitler had ordered a desperate counterattack that would later be called the Battle of the Bulge. The German plan was simple but dangerous. Break through the thin American lines, race across Belgium, capture the port of Antwerp, and split the Allied armies in half. To do that, German armored units had to smash through small villages like Krinkelt and clear the road toward the Meuse River. American commanders studying the maps understood exactly why Krinkelt mattered. The narrow road running through the village connected several critical supply routes. If German tanks captured it, they could roll straight west toward larger towns like Malmedy and Verviers. That meant Krinkelt had to hold, even though the American units defending it were already tired and outnumbered. Just before dawn that morning, Lieutenant Colonel Walter M. Robertson, commanding the 2nd Battalion of the 23rd Infantry Regiment, walked slowly through the snowy streets of the village. His breath formed clouds in the freezing air as he checked on his men. Soldiers crouched inside doorways and behind stone walls, rifles ready, eyes fixed toward the eastern road. Machine gun teams had set up positions inside barns and second-floor windows. Anti-tank teams waited behind piles of firewood and overturned carts. But the real surprise waited farther back, hidden where German scouts could not easily see them. Several American tank destroyers from the 644th Tank Destroyer Battalion had quietly moved into position during the night. These were M10 tank destroyers, long and low vehicles with open turrets and powerful 3-inch guns designed specifically to hunt enemy tanks. Their engines were now silent, buried behind hedges and buildings. The gunners inside the steel hulls watched through frozen sights, waiting for the signal that German armor had entered the kill zone. The men inside those vehicles understood the danger. Panther tanks were among the most feared armored vehicles in the war. The German Panzerkampfwagen 5 Panther carried a long 75mm KWK-42 gun that could destroy most Allied tanks at long range. Its thick frontal armor made it extremely hard to penetrate from the front. If the Panthers reached the village streets with speed and surprise, the American defenders could be overwhelmed quickly. But American commanders had learned something important in months of fighting across Europe. Panthers were powerful, but they had weaknesses. Their side armor was thinner. Their long hull made them less flexible on tight village roads. Their engines could overheat if pushed too hard, and if they advanced too quickly without infantry support, they could be trapped. That was exactly what the Americans were planning. Around 7:30 in the morning, the quiet fields east of Krinkelt began to tremble. Soldiers listening carefully could now hear the low mechanical growl of engines echoing through the frozen forest. The sound slowly grew louder, tracks grinding snow, metal clanking. Officers passed the word quietly along the American line. German armor was coming. From the edge of the woods, the first Panther appeared like a dark shadow against the white snow. Its long barrel pointed straight toward the village road. Behind it, more Panthers rolled forward in a line, their engines roaring as they picked up speed. They belonged to elements of the German 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, one of the armored formations pushing hard through the Ardennes. Inside the lead Panther, the German commander believed the Americans were already retreating west. The previous days had seen American units fall back quickly under pressure. German commanders expected another weak defense. Their goal was to punch straight through Krinkelt and keep moving before the Allies could regroup. But as the Panthers advanced down the road toward the village, something felt wrong. The streets ahead looked too quiet. No artillery fire, no visible tanks, no infantry moving, just empty buildings and snow-covered fields. American soldiers hiding inside the village could now clearly see the approaching German tanks through cracks in walls and shattered windows. The Panthers were less than 600 yards away. Some riflemen tightened their grip on their weapons. Machine gunners waited with fingers resting on cold triggers. Inside one of the hidden M10 tank destroyers, Sergeant James Holloway leaned closer to his sight. The large shape of the Panther filled his view. He could see snow being pushed aside by its tracks. He could even make out the black Balkan Kreuz painted on the turret. But Holloway did not fire. The order had been clear. Wait until the German tanks were fully inside the trap. The Panthers continued forward, their crews unaware that several American guns were already aimed directly at them from hidden positions. A second Panther rolled behind the first, then a third. Their long barrels slowly turned left and right, searching for threats. But the American vehicles remained completely still. Then the lead German tank reached the center of the village road. At that moment, an American officer raised his arm behind a stone wall and shouted a single command: "Fire!" The silence of the snowy village exploded instantly. From behind a barn, the first M10 fired its 3-inch gun. The blast shattered the quiet morning as a bright flash erupted from the barrel. The shell traveled across the road in less than a second and slammed into the side armor of the lead Panther. The impact punched through the steel and detonated inside the turret. The German tank stopped instantly, smoke pouring from its hatches. Before the Panther crews could react, a second American tank destroyer opened fire from another hidden position. Its shell struck the next Panther in line, hitting just below the turret ring. Flames burst from the engine deck as the crew inside struggled to escape. Now the entire village erupted into battle. Machine guns opened fire from windows and rooftops. Bazooka teams fired rockets from alleyways and behind stone fences. American infantry targeted German soldiers riding behind the tanks or advancing on foot through the snow. The Panthers tried to respond quickly. Their turrets rotated, searching for the hidden American guns. One German gunner spotted movement behind a farmhouse and fired a powerful shell that blew apart part of the building. But the American tank destroyers had already moved slightly after firing, using their mobility to stay hidden. Another M10 fired from behind a hedgerow, striking a Panther's side armor as it attempted to turn. The German tank lurched to a halt, smoke rising from its damaged hull. For the German column, the attack had turned into chaos. Instead of racing through an empty village, the Panthers were now trapped inside narrow streets, with enemies firing from every direction. Their powerful frontal armor meant little when shells were hitting them from the sides and rear. Inside the American tank destroyers, the crews worked with intense focus. The loader slammed another shell into the breach. The gunner adjusted his sight. The commander shouted directions over the roar of engines and gunfire. Another shot, another explosion. A fourth Panther took a direct hit as it tried to reverse out of the road. The shell pierced the thinner rear armor near the engine compartment. Flames erupted instantly, but the Germans were not finished yet. Several Panthers behind the first group stopped at the edge of the village and began firing carefully into suspected American positions. Their long-range guns blasted through buildings and walls, trying to destroy the hidden tank destroyers. One American M10 was hit by a German shell that tore through the open turret. The explosion sent fragments of metal and wood flying across the snow. The crew scrambled to escape as the damaged vehicle burned. Still, the ambush continued to work. The Americans had forced the Panthers into a position where their numbers and speed no longer mattered. Every turn of the narrow village roads exposed their weaker side armor to waiting guns. Meanwhile, American infantry from the 23rd Infantry Regiment held their ground around the streets. Riflemen fired carefully at German infantry trying to advance between the tanks. Mortar teams dropped shells behind the enemy vehicles, cutting off their support. Nearby, forward observers from the American artillery units were also watching the battle carefully. Using field radios, they called coordinates back to artillery batteries positioned miles behind the lines. Within minutes, heavy American artillery began firing into the forest roads east of Krinkelt. Shells exploded among German supply trucks and infantry columns attempting to reinforce the Panther units. The ground shook with each blast. Trees snapped. Snow flew into the air as fragments of steel tore through the forest. For German commanders trying to push more armor forward, the road toward Krinkelt suddenly became far more dangerous. Back inside the village, the fighting remained intense. Some German crews attempted to abandon their damaged tanks and escape through the snow-covered fields. American riflemen quickly moved to capture them. Others tried desperately to repair their vehicles under fire, but the American guns did not give them time. Through the smoke and confusion, one Panther attempted to push deeper into the village streets, hoping to break through the American line. Its gun fired again and again, smashing walls and sending debris across the road. But as the tank turned slightly to avoid a burning vehicle blocking its path, it exposed its side armor. A hidden M10 waiting behind a collapsed barn fired immediately. The shell struck the Panther's hull just below the turret. Seconds later, thick black smoke poured from the tank as flames spread across its engine deck. For the American soldiers watching the scene unfold, the trap had worked exactly as planned. The battle lasted less than an hour, but in that short time, the quiet village of Krinkelt became a battlefield of burning metal and shattered stone. Destroyed tanks blocked the road. Ammunition exploded inside damaged vehicles. Snow around the village turned gray and black with smoke and debris. By late morning, several German Panthers had been destroyed or forced to withdraw back toward the forest. Thick black smoke rose above the snow-covered houses. The road that the German column had hoped to race through was now blocked by disabled tanks. For the American soldiers who survived the fight, the ambush had proven something important. Even the most powerful armored vehicles in the German army could be stopped with careful planning, patience, and well-positioned tank destroyers. But the fighting around Krinkelt was far from over. Throughout the afternoon and into the next days, German forces continued to launch attacks across the Ardennes front. Villages like Krinkelt and nearby Rocherath became key defensive positions for American troops trying to slow the German advance. The winter conditions made everything harder. Temperatures dropped below freezing, weapons jammed in the cold. Soldiers struggled to stay warm while sleeping in foxholes filled with snow. Supply trucks often had difficulty reaching forward units because icy roads slowed movement. Yet despite these challenges, American units continued to hold the line. Reinforcements slowly arrived. Additional artillery batteries were moved into position. Engineers strengthened defensive positions around villages and crossroads. Each hour that the German advance was delayed allowed more Allied forces to organize a stronger defense farther west. For German commanders, time was becoming the enemy. The offensive depended on speed and surprise, but battles like the one at Krinkelt were slowing their armored columns. Destroyed tanks blocked narrow roads. Fuel trucks struggled to reach forward units. Allied aircraft, once the weather improved, began attacking German supply lines from the air. In many ways, the quiet ambush in that small Belgian village represented a larger story unfolding across the entire Ardennes. German armored power had launched the offensive with strength and confidence, but determined resistance from American units was slowly turning that momentum into costly delays. Weeks later, historians studying the Battle of the Bulge would point to dozens of small defensive battles like this one. None of them alone decided the outcome, but together they slowed the German advance enough for the Allies to regroup and counterattack. And in the snowy streets of Krinkelt on that cold December morning, the lesson had already been written in burning steel and drifting smoke. Sometimes victory does not belong to the biggest gun or the thickest armor. Sometimes it belongs to the soldiers who wait patiently in silence, watch the road carefully, and choose the exact moment to open fire.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.